Real quick on that speech issue, I spent a lot of time last night reading and watching a lot of really smart legal experts break that one down. And you can say anything, really. You can, other than threatening violence, you can lie about anything and be protected by free speech. But when you take direct actions based on that free speech, Bill, that's a different story. That's where I think the special counsel, Jack Clark, made the case. This is an action. These are actions based on that free speech. I think that's the distinction.
Well, he failed at those, right? So
Well, that's like saying you failed to rob a bank. You still robbed the bank, and you don't get off because you failed to rob the bank.
See. He's going to have to prove. Jack Smith is going to have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. And truthfully, if I'm Trump's legal team, I'm looking forward to hearing Rick Essenberg's opinion on the legal aspects of this. But I'm asking for a different venue. I don't think Trump can be fairly charged in the District of Columbia. I just don't think there's anything that remotely resembles a jury of his peers there. So, I think the first thing would be a change of venue if it's not to have the charges dismissed.
All right, Joe, you heard what Bill said. You also probably watched some of this and listened to some of the commentary last night. From the Democratic point of view, strategist that you are, what do you think?
Well, I got to be honest. I'm having a hard time looking at it from a Democratic strategist point of view. Before I'm a Democratic strategist, I'm an American. And I view this as incredibly important in the history of our country. And so if we just take a step back for a second, for almost 250 years, we have said that part of what makes America great is that nobody is above the law. But we've never really tested that proposition. And so as a 247-year-old country, we're about to find out if we really are a place where no one is above the law. The former president, as is laid out in the indictment, was part of a conspiracy to prevent a peaceful transition of power. And to Bill's point about it's just speech, it is not just speech. When, as they lay out, they were lying to the fake electors. They were falsely representing that these would only be used if the lawsuits were successful. This sure looks like a conspiracy. It is, in my view, a grave affront against the United States of America for someone who loses an election to try to remain in power. And what I really hope is that we don't go right to the politics of this. It's that we actually take a step back and go, this is an important case, not just because of who's involved, but because of what it's going to say about our country. And I hope that we listen to people in the weeks and months ahead who first understand the gravity of this. No one should feel happy today. I'm not happy as an American that an American president has been charged. No, anybody expressing glee or joy can sit down and shut the hell up. This should never have happened, and now we're going to find out some things about our country.
Bill McCoshen, Joe Zepecki joining us in a special edition of the Political Power Hour, along with Sandy and yours truly. So gentlemen, we're talking about a president who really has done things that no other president has done before, in my opinion, who has challenged the legality of elections, the accuracy of elections over and over again, both in public and in private, apparently, if you look at what the special counsel has turned up, especially with his conversations with Vice President Mike Pence. Bill, as a Republican, just look short term. I put this in some of our show notes. This, to me, suggests that those people who support Donald Trump have supported him, have voted for him. They feel as strongly as ever. I had a conversation away from the show last night. The first person I talked to about this, because he asked about politics in the show, said, well, what about Joe Biden? What about Hunter Biden? When's that investigation going to happen? That's the reality of those of us who talk about politics, who live in the world of politics, and frankly, any voter nowadays seems to be tuned in and all this stuff. That's the reality we face. This actually empowers Donald Trump's candidacy, at least for the nomination.
It sucks all the oxygen out of the GOP primary. He's the only one getting attention, and it'll be that way all the way up until the debate. None of the other candidates are going to be able to get any oxygen until August 23rd in Milwaukee. And if Trump shows up that night, they'll get none still. So, I mean, this all but assures him the nomination, which is not what I want. I want a fresh face. I want some new blood as the leader of the Republican Party. All of it's very troubling to me. Again, I think after December 14th, which was the date of certification, this was over from a legal standpoint, in my opinion. I think Trump should have been gracious at that point. I think he is clearly winning the GOP primary by 30 to 40 points, depending on what poll you look at. I think he'd be beating Joe Biden by 10 points today had he left graciously and not demanded that the vice president do what he did or try to do something that he refused to do. And frankly, I said on your show before, and I believe it to this day, and I'll always believe it, Mike Pence did the right thing. I think Joe Zepecki is thoughtful as always. He and I are Americans first, partisans second. I am deeply troubled by all of this. And part of that troubled nature comes from the fact that his opponent is the guy bringing these charges. I mean, this is like third world stuff. I hope we never see anything like this again in our lifetime, but here we are. And some of it is Trump's making. I have to say that. And you're going to get, texts and calls probably saying McCoshen's on the other side. Well, I'm a Republican first, and I think a lot of this is Donald Trump's own making. After December 14th, all the way until January 20th, he did things that were completely unnecessary and should have been more gracious.
By some of the responses I see from my Republican elected leaders, I don't understand it. I don't understand this willingness to suck up to a former president who I think has broken the law. Again, innocent until proven guilty. I get all that. But some pretty clear evidence laid out in the, 45 or 47 page indictment. 78 counts now stacked upon multiple indictments with more to come. As a Democrat, Joe, as an American, when we think about stories like this that are historic, that are, I guess, something we've never seen before, take off your political hat if you want to. I mean, it should shock us, and yet still today we're getting the same silly partisan nonsense. Have we learned anything?
Well, I hope so. And to underscore it, I mean, here's what's different. It's not different that former President Trump finds himself in some legal hot water, right? We've almost become numb to that. But what I will just remind people is this is the first time of any of the legal problems that he's facing that it is due to his conduct as president of the United States, right? We've got the classified documents. He was a former president. We've got the E. Jean Carroll stuff. It was a long time ago. This gets to the heart of the authorities and what the checks and balances on the president of the United States are. And if a president of the United States does it, is it a crime, right? That's the old Nixon thing. And so what I'm struck by today is there are some people who are saying nothing. There are some people who are saying, let's watch this process play out. And then there are some people who, as you kind of allude to, are like kind of go into their partisan battle stations. And I just am going to have a really hard time taking those folks seriously because this isn't a game. The United States of America, our Constitution, the idea of America, of this shining city on a hill, all of that matters way the heck more than whether Democrats or Republicans win the next election. That's what I believe, and that's why I'm trying to be sober and cautious and careful, because you are right. Donald Trump, as an accused defendant, has an extraordinary number of rights at his disposal now, and included in those is a presumption of innocence until proven guilty. And I will grant him that too, while noting these are serious charges and this is a serious test for our country.
And as Steve, you're expressing great disappointment at how the reactions have been from Republicans. Gentlemen, what is your opinion? The word impeachment for Biden has already been floated around based on Hunter Biden's trials and tribulations. Will the House attempt a Biden impeachment for retribution for this new Jack Smith indictment?
I'll let Bill weigh in on that.
Yeah. Let's talk about the one Republican who has been very sober about this, and that's Mike Pence. I mean, this entire episode is probably the reason that he's not even competitive in the GOP primary. There's a certain percentage of Republican voters who view him as a traitor, which is really unfair. I think Mike Pence did the right thing. I think he did the only thing he could legally do on that day. Yet that's probably disqualifying him from being even competitive, to say nothing of potentially winning the primary. He was very direct yesterday that, he thinks the president was wrong about this and that he should face some consequences. I expect we'll hear similar things from Chris Christie today, but Chris Christie seems to be that bull in a china shop as it relates to Trump. He wants to be the one guy that knocks him out. I don't see that happening. I mean, all of this from a political standpoint is giving Trump even more oxygen in the GOP primary. And I would, Sandy, separate your question. I think whatever happens with Biden is going to be unrelated to the Trump charges, even though guys like Jim Jordan are clearly close to Trump. So is Kevin McCarthy. I think McCarthy is sober enough that whatever Hunter Biden investigation, where that leads as it relates to the president of the United States, Joe Biden, will take a course based on the facts. And I think Jim Comer is committed to that as well, the congressman who's leading this effort. So I don't think there will be a tit for tat, if that was your question. We may get to an impeachment inquiry, and that may or may not happen on or about Labor Day. But again, I think that's separate and based on the facts of that particular case. But it's a sad state for America that these are the two guys that are the front runners for both parties. I mean, we are so much better than this as a nation. I think both parties should flush their top guy, and come in with somebody new and fresh and younger and more vigorous, but that's not the course we're on right now.
Since you guys are two of the smartest political strategists I know, I want to ask you this question. What does it say about the voters who cling to this guy despite all of this noise, all of the nonsense, all of the theatrics, something we've never really seen in recent history? And I get there's been presidents that have been slightly odd and weird, but this seems to be so far out of line of the decorum and the presentation that I would expect to see from a president, public or private. What does it say about the voters, Bill, that they refuse to give up on this? Is it just presumption of innocence, or is it more than that?
It's more than that. It's the brand he built with them. He talked about the forgotten man and woman in the 2016 race, and he identified them, which was sort of odd. I mean, here you had a billionaire who grew up with privilege, who was connecting with working people. I mean, he had 4 times more Democrats flip over than Ronald Reagan ever did, the old Reagan Democrats, which my father was back in 1980. He had more working people coming his way. He changed the face of the Republican Party from country clubbers, and C-suite people to working people. And frankly, I think that was a good thing. And these people still feel forgotten. They feel still left out. And he represents the one guy fighting for them. So the charges in their mind are the system is out to get him because he's looking out for them. It's not. Some people will suggest it's about their intelligence. That's baloney. It has nothing to do with that. He represented, in their minds, somebody who was fighting for their interest. And that will never go away. If there's charges in Georgia next week, it'll be the same. His numbers will not go down.
I would argue, Bill and Joe, and I'll let Joe speak to what you just said, that it's the hardest thing to do is to admit you're wrong. And when you voted for someone like Donald Trump and you see what's happened post-presidency and, frankly, during the presidency, it's hard to admit you're wrong. And I think voters are stubborn. They're loyal, immensely loyal. We often get this posed in the context of, well, who am I going to vote for if it's not Trump? I'm not voting for Joe Biden. Joe, what do we do with that reality?
Well, I don't have all the answers, but I would add 2 things for the explanation. I think the first is the information environment in which we live and the way that people consume their news is very different today, and it has created spaces where people can get what is borderline or arguably propaganda over and over again, and that stuff works. The second thing is, and Bill's exactly right, this is not about anyone's intelligence, in my view. I think there is a decades-long frustration felt by people in this country at a system that has grown less and less in touch with how people live, what they expect from their government, and what they want this country to accomplish. And that frustration has eroded trust in institutions. We see that across the board. Most recently, this morning, another all-time low in public trust in the Supreme Court, in the news media, in government. Even the military has lost trust and the confidence of the American people. And in that environment where you have less trust than ever before, and you have an information environment where this is not the Nixon era where there's 3 nightly newscasts who are going to give it to you straight and 3 or 4 important daily newspapers. You've got an environment where people have decided this is their guy and nothing's going to move them off that. And that's, we are going to find out whether that's just problematic or whether it's dangerous. I think on January 6th, we saw it can be dangerous. We're about to find out whether that's still the case, if it's still dangerous, or if people are going to move off of it. And I will just say this on the politics. I'm not so sure that at some point the dam isn't going to break here, and this is going to start to hurt former President Trump politically. And we can presume to know, we can state with confidence what we think is going to happen, but we don't have a roadmap here. We've never seen anything like this. And so, take everything with a truckload of salt.
He is Joe Zepecki, Bill McCoshen, joining us in a special edition of the Political Power Hour. Steve and Sandy. We'll take a break here. More of that conversation after this.
We are just a few weeks away from the Republican presidential debate, the very first one. Does this now force him to attend?
I don't think it forces him to attend, Sandy. Go ahead, Joe.
I'll just say I think it makes it more likely, but to me, the $64,000 question and the determining factor was always going to be if one of these came down within 48 to 72 hours of the debate, I have a hard time believing he would be able to help himself and that he would have to go out there. So I don't know. I think at this point, it's probably a little bit more likely he attends. And, the political move in his mind may be, I have to stand on this stage and demand fealty from all these other candidates or make sure I beat them and stuff them in a locker, because at this point he may believe that the only way he gets out of legal trouble is winning the election again. And that's, that's where we are. But I don't know. What do you think, Bill?
I think let me give you the flip of that. I think it's less likely he will come because he knows that the Fox News hosts will have to ask each of the candidates about this. They will be forced to take positions about his various indictments and about some of his statements and about whether or not they will pardon him. This debate will be about Trump, whether he's there or not. So why not let them fight it out? And then, if I'm him, he no longer tweets, but he does put out public statements on Truth Social. I'm critiquing it in real time if I'm him. I'm not standing on that stage, but I'm considering standing on the stage in California to knock out who's ever left.
One of the things I was thinking about last night as I was watching some of this, digesting all this, incredible coverage across multi-networks, Fox to CNN to everything in between and beyond, is that at some point, I think the only real game changer would be for all of the candidates who are running against the former president, the Ron DeSantis and some of the other folks who have been pretty critical, Tim Scott's, who say, you know what, this is not something that we can endorse or support. We are not going to publicly criticize our Department of Justice because, frankly, this is a bridge too far. We are not going to put up with it. Unless that happens, I don't think anything really changes politically, Bill.
I agree with you. I mean, there was a lane, maybe still is, of 60% of GOP primary voters who are open to somebody else. Nobody has filled that lane well yet, or close to filling that lane. So, the more they get asked to defend Trump and what's their position on Trump and, what about Hunter, it ultimately is all about somebody other than themselves. and it's a quagmire none of them can get out of as long as all of this continues.
All right, I want to ask one more question. We'll start with you, Joe. One of the things that is really important is to kind of figure things out from a expert perspective, subject matter expert. But this is guesswork. This is putting your crystal ball, looking at your crystal ball, putting your prognosticator hat on. Where are we a year from now, Joe? Just your best guess. Where are we a year from now with this, with the Democrats, with Congress? Where are we at a year from now?
I think the Republican Party is in disarray, trying to figure out how they can navigate stopping Mr. Trump from being their nominee.
Bill?
Because I think he's going to win. I think he's going to win the nomination, and then the timing of this is like by the late spring of next year, he's going to have a ton of delegates and be on a glide path to the nomination. And then the legal troubles are going to get even worse. Then things like plea deals will come into will be on the table. And at some point, the Republican Party may have to figure out how can we change who our nominee is.
Makes for an interesting convention. Bill, rather?
It does. Let me bring it closer to home here in Wisconsin. I think that all of this is impacting a potential candidate against U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin, who's seeking her third term in the United States Senate. This should be a desirable position. She should be considered at least a competitive target for Mitch McConnell. So far, he has shown no interest in the state of Wisconsin. And as of today, there's not a single Republican announced against her. In fact, Congressman Tom Tiffany was the latest to say thanks but no thanks yesterday. So I think the people that are kicking the tires on this are watching whether or not Trump is going to be at the top of the ticket, because it does impact their race in the state of Wisconsin. Let's face it, Ron Johnson probably got Trump elected in 2016. He got more votes in the state of Wisconsin than Donald Trump did. Trump didn't have that same benefit in 2020 in the state of Wisconsin and lost by 22,000 votes. So, those two races tend to be tied together. And if I'm, thinking about spending 10 or 15 or 20 million of my own money, I got to know whether or not I got a realistic chance. And right now it's an open question.
Gentlemen, I appreciate your extra time today. We'll jump right back into the fray on Friday, live from the Wisconsin State Fair. I'll close with this. I love this quote. I'm with the former vice president on this one. Mike Pence's statement on January 6th, former President Trump demanded that I choose between him and the Constitution. I chose the Constitution, and I always will. Lots of respect for Mike Pence on that statement last night. Gentlemen, we'll pick it up on Friday. Thank you.
See you Friday.
See ya. Thanks.
All right. A great conversation from our two political strategists, Bill and Joe. That's why we brought them on, because this is a big day.